Hello everyone, this is Nick with Hylio, back again with another operations manual walkthrough video. Today's video is going to be the third in the operations manual series. We're going to be going through the calibrations and the first flights. So this video should be pretty quick compared to the others. So let's get right into it. Calibrations. Most of the calibrations should be done before you receive the drone. There are, I think, 5 or 6 different calibrations in general. We've got compass, flow meter, and then those are the 2 you're probably going to do at some point. And then other calibrations for voltage, accelerometer, level, and barometer. So we're going to spend the most time on compass and flow meter because you're probably going to be doing these most of the time, and hopefully you never have to do any of the other ones. So starting with compass, the compass is going to need to be calibrated whenever you travel a certain distance. So generally 50 miles, 100 miles, something like that, it is recommended to calibrate the compass. You'll know that your compass needs calibration if it's looking like it's flying maybe a little shaky or just a little loose. The result will be that the heading of the drone, so the compass is how it knows which way is north and south. The heading of the drone might be a little bit off. So it may be flying down its path, and as opposed to flying with its nose perfectly straight, it'll be a few degrees off to one direction. So correcting this requires a compass calibration. There are 2 different ways you can do a compass calibration. There is a regular calibration and a fast calibration. The regular calibration involves picking up the drone and physically rotating it in a number of different orientations, picking it up, rotating it around. That's one style. The regular. Fast calibration involves getting an actual compass, hopefully a very accurate one, maybe on a phone or something like that, and holding it next to the drone and lining it up and basically typing in the current compass heading of the drone. So if it's sitting, the nose of the drone is facing straight north, then you type in 0, for example. We're going to go through the regular compass calibration first. This is pretty much always recommended to do the regular calibration, not the fast calibration, whenever possible, because this will result in a better overall calibration. However, that being said, regular calibration is essentially impossible to do on 72 because it's 15 feet across. So we understand that thing is always going to get fast calibrated. So the process for doing a compass calibration, I will very well likely cut in a video here, maybe after I go through this, of video of someone actually turning the drone around and doing what I'm talking about, so you kind of understand a little bit more. I may just have that be a separate video, but if I do, I'll just drop it in here between compass and regular and fast cal. But going on, to do one of these calibrations, basically you want to take the drone and first set it outside, has to be outside, at least 20 yards from any large metal objects. So large metal objects like buildings, vehicles, stuff like that, cause interference in this calibration. It messes with the compass, heading being next to metal. So first thing first, get it out far away. I mean, the farther the better. If you're 50 yards away from anything, that's great. Set the drone down. If you've got a 10 or a 16, you're probably going to want the arms folded out and the elbows tightened up. On any of their drones, you're probably going to want the propellers folded up with the rubber bands over them so they're not flopping around. So like I said, this is going to involve picking up the drone and physically moving it. So if you've got the arms flopping around, the propellers flopping around, it's going to make it a lot more difficult. So we're out in a good spot. Everything is secured. Now we're going to put the battery in there. We put the battery in there, and we'll want to take the strap and strap that battery down. On the Ag 30s, the 22s and the 30s, you don't use the strap normally, but it will be in that tool bag, and you want to wrap it around the center of the frame to hold those batteries in for when you're turning this drone around and upside down. Now, go ahead and plug in the battery. So your drone should be out far away from stuff. arms and props secured, battery plugged in, battery secured, you're going to go back to your computer. You're going to jump on your computer, connect with GCS, and go to the maintenance tab. When you're in the maintenance tab, you want to go and find compass calibration, and you're going to hit compass, hit regular, and then hit yes. Once you hit yes, the drone will start. You want to make sure the drone is sitting on the ground when you start the calibration. It's not already in the air. Now, you're probably going to want 2 people to do this, at least. You don't want to let it sit there for 10 minutes before you go pick it up. You want to start it, go out there within the next 20 seconds or so, pick it up and start. So, process, I'm going to use this controller here as an example of just, what you're going to do with the drone. You can imagine that you will certainly want to have 2 people to do this. You can do it with one on some of the drones, the 10s and 16s. You got to be careful though, because if you drop it, you can certainly damage it if you drop it from 5 feet in the air. So first thing you want to do, you want to pick up the drone, preferably one person on either end holding the motors kind of out on the end. Pick it up and you want to spin it in a full 360. Now next, you want to turn it with its left side facing the ground, and we're just following this diagram here. Left side facing the ground, full 360. Right side facing the ground, full 360. Nose facing the ground, full 360. And its back end facing the ground, full 360. Now, lastly, and people very often forget this one, you have to do upside down, full 360. You got to get that drone turned all the way upside down in the air. Again, this is why you generally want 2 people for this shot. Doesn't matter what order you do this in, just as long as you get all those full 360s done, the compass calibration should finish. There's 2 compasses on the drone, so while you're doing this, you're gonna, you hit start or yes on the software. 2 progress bars are gonna go from 0 to 100%. Honestly, it's even better to have 3 people because someone can be on the computer providing a little moral support, say, hey, we're at like 60%, 70%, 90%, almost there, because it gets difficult, and it's nice to know that you're almost done. If it doesn't finish, then you probably missed like a few degrees somewhere and just kind of move it around randomly. It'll probably finish. It will also finish before doing everything sometimes, and that's going to depend on how good of a spot that you pick. If you're kind of close to a truck or something, it's going to take longer. It probably needs to see all the spins. So farther away the better. You'll get done with it sooner. On that note, it can be so sensitive to metal, you'll want to make sure you'll want to even take your phone out of your pocket. Phone out of the pocket, keys out of the pocket, really as much metal as you can, set it away because it will help. And while you're doing this, you want to make sure that you don't knock the GPSs around, because these compasses are inside the GPS units. So if you're brushing your leg or something up against the GPS while you're doing it, it may not work. And what you'll see happen if this compass calibration fails is that the progress bar will go to 100 and then just jump back to 0. If it does that, don't just keep spinning because it probably won't ever finish. Go ahead, just set the drone down, turn it off, turn it on again, and just give it a fresh start. Those can be some of the most, that can lead to a very frustrating situation if you just keep spinning, and it's very difficult. And it just goes to 100 back and forth over and over again. Usually if it gets reset to 0, it's probably not going to finish unless you just restart it, try again. So that's the regular compass calibration. You shouldn't have to do it too often, but you probably will need to do it before your first flight unless you're one of our neighbors here in Texas. I've had some people not do it for years and go hundreds and hundreds of miles. Would not recommend that. The drone will not fly as well. The software, if the drone really needs calibration, it will tell you and it won't let you take off. It'll say calibrate compass. So yeah, that is the regular compass calibration. The fast compass calibration is much easier. So first thing that you need to do is set the drone in a ideally nice and level place. Then you need to get your phone. iPhones have a built-in compass app that's pretty accurate. Androids, I think you can download them, but if your phone is a little bit older, it's probably not going to work super well. And this fast calibration, it is very important to have something very accurate. This isn't the sort of thing that you can just get within like 5 degrees and it's going to be good. I mean, it very well might be, but this is why it is much more preferred to do the actual calibration, the spinning it around, even though it's not possible for the 72s, because this is such an error-prone procedure. You really want to make sure that this measurement you take of the direction of the drone is going to be accurate. One thing to really look out for is getting the front backwards with the rear of the drone. Super important. Because you're not physically moving the drone, it has no information about feeling the magnetic field move and kind of learning that way. It's just believing what you tell it. So if you tell it forwards is backwards, you will be in for a bad time. So fast compass calibration, you set it up. Similar process, you just click compass and then you would select fast. And then you type in the heading from 0 to 365 degrees of the front of that drone. So you can set your phone, generally if it's an iPhone, kind of along the front or along the side, making sure it is as straight as possible to the front of the drone. We recommend taking that phone, kind of pulling it away, moving it around, and setting it back. And doing that 2 or 3 times to kind of average it out. Say if I'm off by, it's 153 and then it's 151, it's 153 and it's 152, maybe I'm going to pick 152, 152 and a half, something like that. So again, very important that you get this correct. If you are getting readouts, you're kind of taking it back and forth, and your readouts are more than, say, 3 degrees off when you go and do it, you probably need to get a better compass, and you should not be doing a fast compass calibration because your compass probably isn't accurate enough. Now, once you have that number, you type it in and you click finish, and that's it. Now, once you do this, you will want to test fly it at least once in a safe location to make sure that this calibration is correct. Now, the drone has backups in case you mess this stuff up. But the backups take a few seconds to kick in. So let's just pretend that I put my compass calibration in totally backwards. What's going to happen is that the next time I take off, that drone is going to think that forwards is backwards. And I take off, it's probably going to start drifting around because it doesn't know where it's going. It's just going to take off and kind of drift around a little bit. If you told it to fly that way, probably going to fly this way. Now, it's going to do that for about 2, 3, 4 seconds, somewhere in there. And before it realizes that you screwed up and called forward backwards, and it's going to default over to another source of direction. Basically, you want to do this first flight after a fast calibration far enough away from stuff that in case you did screw it up and you got it backwards, the drone could move around for at least a couple of seconds and not be in danger of running into anything. If it does do that, if it turns out you got it wrong and 3 seconds later it's going to snap to, and you'll see it'll physically kind of snap, like, okay, I know where I am now. When it goes to the backup, you're going to want to land it, and when you land it, it's going to say that it needs its compass calibrated again, and it won't let you take off till you recalibrate. So if you do the fast calibration, number 1, be careful, and number 2, test fly it in a safe location, like good 20, 30 yards away from anything before you go and fly it in some critical area. So just a few more tips, when you should be doing this compass calibration every few months. If it starts to fly a little crooked, you're supposed to do it if you're moving more than 50 miles. If you have a lot of magnetic interference in a certain area, so we've seen people spraying next to pipelines, stuff like that, where there's a ton of metal around, underwater oil lines, stuff like that. You may need to recalibrate in this new area that has this other type of interference. Like I said before, use 2 people whenever possible. You want to do it pretty quick. You don't want to take 5-10 minutes doing this calibration. Once you put it into that calibration mode, you want to just go and get it done. Use the battery strap, and for the 72, we don't expect that you're going to be able to do it. So just do the fast cal on the 72. Again, it is better to do the normal calibration. It will result in a better calibration, but it's not always possible. So next we have our flow meter calibration. So flow meters are going to come from the factory calibrated. Now, based on what chemicals you're spraying, this calibration can change a little bit. Higher density, lower density chemicals, viscosity changes, it's just going to change a bit. The flow meter calibration, to do it, you go to the maintenance tab, connect to the drone, you put the drone somewhere where it can spray, and you're going to need to get some water or some chemical. Plug it in, go click flow meter, select new, and then basically the way the calibration works is you pour in some amount of water. So depending on the drone, maybe a different amount of water. Let's say I pour in 2-3 gallons. Then I have to start this calibration. I have to type in 2 or 3 gallons, whatever I poured in, and then I click go. Basically, the drone is just going to spray out the tanks and just count how many times that little flow meter spins. So pretty simple. The more fluid you put in there, the better, because it will average out. If you had like a little more fluid in the lines or stuff like that, you're going to want to make sure that the system is primed, because the flow meter calibration is going to run until it runs dry, basically, and that's how it knows that it sprayed out the whole tank. But if you start the flow meter calibration and the pump's not primed and it just sits there and runs for 10 seconds and nothing moves, then it's just gonna say the calibration failed. So you need to make sure it's primed. You need to, if you're doing the Ag 30, it has the 2 tanks, it's going to do one tank and then the other tank, so you need to make sure to do them independently. And yeah, nothing too complicated to it. You can expect to get within, 5%, give or take. Anything better than 5% is going to be difficult. It's just going to depend on the flow meter and the chemical and stuff like that. Sometimes you can get to 3% error if you're pretty good about it. If you screw it up pretty bad, there is a reset calibration button once you get into that flow meter calibration. This will reset that number, the calibration number, back to kind of a default that should be relatively close to what the actual number is. Now, let's say you do a calibration, you called 1 gallon 10 gallons on accident. The drone is going to have a really hard time calibrating back to a normal level if the number is just so ridiculously off. So if you get it really wrong, just reset it and then try again. It's not going to be perfect, but if you find that you do the calibration over and over and over, and I find, oh man, I'm always a little heavy for whatever reason, I'm always a little heavy. Well, you can run the calibration back and maybe call 3.1 gallons, 3 gallons, something like that. You can kind of work with it to get the spraying just how you want it. So other calibrations, we have a few different ones: voltage, accelerometer, level, and barometer. We're not really going to talk about these very much because probably 90% of our drone users never do any of these calibrations. So if you need to do them because some errors are popping up, you can talk to a Hylio representative or just read these instructions, but don't go out of your way to do these unless you're being forced to for whatever reason. These calibrations stay, they don't change over time like the flow meter and the compass, with your chemicals and locations and stuff like that. These calibrations, in most cases, you never have to change. So we're not going to talk about these because I don't want you doing them. If you do need to do them, you'll probably be on the phone with a Hylio rep anyway, and they can help you out at that time. Next, we have getting started, doing our first flights. So we've got our drone, we took it out of our crate, we did our compass calibration, and now we just want to start using it. I'm going to assume at this point we've probably spent some time on the simulator. Again, none of these videos are talking about how to use the software. There's separate videos about that, so we're going to maybe make some assumptions that you know how to do some of this stuff. If you don't, jump into that software video or read that software manual. That should help you out. So first thing that we're doing is connecting to the drone with the radio. So drone's out of the box. We're going to plug in some batteries, and the drone is going to start making some beeping sounds. You're going to learn to love those beeping sounds because they never stop. The motors are going to be constantly beeping. You'll hear those beeps all the time. You're also going to hear a beep from the flight controller. So when the flight controller finishes booting up, it makes like a little sing-song beeping sound. You're going to want to just start to pay attention to these various sounds so you can know what they mean over time, kind of get used to what sounds are being made when. But the little sing-song beep, that's the flight controller booted up. It takes some amount of time, 10, 15 seconds, something like that. So there's no point connecting before the flight controller is turned all the way on. So drone's turned on, flight controller's booted up. There is no on-off switch on the drone. So if you want to turn the drone off and on, you just plug and unplug the battery. So now we're onto the computer. We have our software installed. We have our RFD radio plugged into our USB port on our laptop. Software is opened up, and now we're going to go into the top right corner and we're going to click telemetry radio. So this is how we connect through this radio here to the drone. This is how you're communicating with the drone most of the time. We have a USB cable. This is the drone port option here. If you want to plug in directly to the drone, this is generally just for updates and doing flight logs, stuff like that. So just general connection, we're hitting telemetry radio using this radio. If you are connected, you will see a drone appear in all of the tabs throughout the software. It'll say like drone 1 probably all over the place. If you don't see drone 1 in the operations tab, that's generally the easiest because it pops up. If you don't see it, you're not connected. If you are having trouble getting connected, there's a few different things you're going to want to try. First one is just unplug that RFD and then plug it back in. A lot of the time, there's drivers and stuff like that. The first time that you go to plug in this USB radio, for whatever reason, on like 90% of computers, the first time you plug it in doesn't work. You just got to unplug it, plug it back in, then it works all the time. So that's the first thing to try. Next thing, you can always just close and open the software, kind of like a Wi-Fi router. That tends to help. Another thing, restart the computer. So your computer, after you first install the software, it needs like drivers and stuff like that. Sometimes the drivers for the radio won't work until it's restarted once. So if it's the first time you've installed the software, you've got the drone out already, which doesn't happen all that often, you might need to restart it once before the drivers finish installing. Last thing, you can try a different USB port. Some USB ports on older laptops just don't work that well. They're kind of loose. So it's recommended to just use a different one. If you've got like a USB splitter hub here, you see how this is plugged in directly like that? If you've got one of those little splitters that takes that USB port into 3 or 4 things, and you've got like a mouse or something plugged into there, a lot of the time that can cause connection issues because you're now splitting the power that's supposed to be going to this radio is now being shared with a mouse or your phone or anything like that. And that can cause some connection issues because it just won't have enough power going to it. So next, plugging into the drone with a USB cable. So this is for doing updates and for pulling flight logs. So first thing, you want to plug in that USB cable into the drone, and then you want to plug it into the laptop. So on the drone, there are these plugs in the various locations. On the 72, it's on the back of the drone under this cap here. On the 10, it's on the back right leg under a little rubber cap, just popping it right up by the leg. The 16 back left, and the 30 is on the back left on the top on this elbow here. The 72 has a nice cap on it, so it screws on. It's really nice. The other ones have just like a little rubber cover that you're going to want to put on there because it's a direct line to the flight controller. So you want to keep that covered up if you can. Yeah, similar options. If for whatever reason the connection isn't working, you should try the same things. I mean, turning the computer off and on, closing the software helps a lot. Whenever you're plugging in with this USB cable, do not plug in the battery. So if you want to connect to the radio, the battery has to be plugged in because the radio needs to be powered on the drone. If you're plugging in with the USB cable, do not plug in the battery. A lot of the time it won't connect quite right. So just don't forget that, otherwise it's just going to be frustrating. It probably won't work well, whatever you're doing. All right, so we've connected various ways. Probably we connected with the USB cable to update the drone. A lot of the time, if you do a software update, you're going to have to update the drone in order to fly. So now we are ready to start flying. So we've got our pre-flight checklist here, and we have our first flight checklist. So these are our last two things we're going to go through on this video. Pre-flight checklist is going to come laminated in your toolkit. So you're going to want to use this all the time. We are not going to go through too much detail on this right now because that'll probably be a separate video, which again, just like the compass one, I may clip in here or we'll just have it separately later. So a lot of this stuff has to do with kind of physical things on the drone and to the software. So kind of difficult to show that right now, so we're not going to spend too much time if it's not going to make that much sense. But there will be a copy of this in the toolkit, and you're going to want to use it. So this pre-flight checklist is not something we just came up with to keep the FAA happy. This pre-flight checklist is for you to make sure that you don't miss anything and mess anything up. Probably every single item on this checklist here, someone has forgotten about it in the past and crashed their drone because of it. Nothing is on here just for fun, just to make you do things every time the drone takes off. This is all because this can save you from a potential issue. And then first flight. So we're going to do the first flight checklist first because it involves going up to the pre-flight checklist. So first time you're flying your drone, the big thing that you need to know is you should do it in a very controlled environment without a lot of people around. People get these drones. The drones are super cool. Everybody wants to see the drone. Your cousin, your nephew, all the kids, everybody wants to see the drone. It's super cool. You just got it out of the box. And I would recommend you do that in private because you're going to be nervous. There's a lot of people around. They're going to push you to do more, to go faster before you understand how to use the machine, before you've learned anything. So my recommendation is you get the drone just by yourself, maybe a partner who's actually involved with what's going on. You take the drone out to a location where you can offer yourself some grace. There are no obstacles anywhere nearby. Your vehicle is good and far away. You have the drone just nice and kind of in the middle of nowhere. You can take off, and if you don't know what you're doing and you sent it the wrong direction on an auto mission, you got plenty of time to press that land button and the drone will just land and there's going to be no consequence. That's what you want here. You want middle of nowhere, some grace to make some mistakes, and no people to push you to go doing something stupid. So environment, super important. And check your weather too, because nothing worse than getting rain on your first day. Initial setup, so you're going to want to make sure that you're updated. So get that GCS on the computer. You want to plug into, or you want to have Wi-Fi. Once you have internet on the computer, close and open the software. If there's a big green button at the top, a little download arrow, you're going to want to click that. It's going to download the latest update to your computer. Then you're going to want to update the drone by plugging in with the USB cable. We'll more about this later, but you go to the maintenance tab and hit update. It's going to update the drone. So that's the first thing. Make sure that you're fully updated. Next thing, you just want to make sure that your RC is charged. You got power for your RC for your computer. Everything's ready to go. First flight, you don't want things dying on you. Set the drone up 30 yards away. You're miles away from yourself here, so you got plenty of space. You're going to want to do your compass calibration because, like I said, this is the first flight. Unless you're one of our neighbors down here in Texas, you're going to need to do this. Do your compass calibration. Load the tanks up. You could do a third of a tank, just a little bit. Don't do it all the way, or don't put anything in it at all. Either way is fine. Don't really recommend filling it up all the way, especially if you're just, it's your first few flights, you're just going to fly around probably and, learn it a little bit. If the tanks have more fluid in them, or fluid at all, it's going to use a lot more battery. So you're just burning battery for no reason, especially if you're just practicing. There's no need to be doing a ton of spraying. Then lastly, doing a mission. So drone setup, environment is set up. We're going to do an auto mission here. Your first flight can be with the controller, can be with the computer. Either way is fine. Really just depends on what you're most comfortable with and what you think is going to just, be the best for you. If you're probably going to be doing auto missions almost always, as most of our ag customers are, then just do an auto mission. Get used to what you're going to be doing. You're going to want to practice doing both. Practice doing some auto and some manual just so you know how to do it. But make something nice and small, miles away from anything, and go through it. Last thing here, follow your pre-flight checklist. So when you're doing this, especially the first flight, this pre-flight checklist does a good job as much of making sure that you're doing all the safe stuff. It also does a really good job of kind of walking you through getting that drone into the air, as far as what you want to be checking on the software and stuff like that. So just a few tips. You're going to want to take a couple of weeks. Just do some auto missions as much as you can. We really don't recommend, you get the drone and you want to start doing spray jobs for money the next day. Take some time to practice. Practice the different mission types, some perimeters, some spots, some splines, mostly what you're going to be doing yourself, different types of areas. So different, putting obstacles in different places. You can pretend there's a tree in the middle of the field, stuff like that. There's a section later on that we're going to talk about for safety for generating missions, and just how far to mark your boundaries away from stuff. I would not skip that section. Super important. Almost all crashes happen because of poor mission generation. So we'll talk about that at length later, about how to pick your mission boundaries and how to set up missions to be safe and not crash. You're going to want to just take all of that advice in. If you watch one of these videos, watch that one. I don't know which one it is yet. Watch that video and just utilize that. Be thinking about those strategies while you're doing these practice flights. So that's your first flight. And lastly here, before we close out this video, we're just going to take a look through this pre-flight checklist. So first section here, so there's 5 sections. We got the drone's hardware, we got GCS, what we're doing on the computer, we got your locations, we got taking off, and we got landing. So first section here is just the drone. So we want to make sure those arms are out and those elbows on all the arms are tight. In particular the 72, we want to be checking those every flight. A lot of this drone stuff, we understand that if you're flying 50 times in a row, maybe you're not going to go and check the propellers and the tightness every single time. You for sure want to check this stuff very closely the first takeoff of the day, for a particular field, especially after you travel and set it up. These elbows, though, in particular on the 72, you're going to want to check more frequently because they can come a little bit loose over time after flights. Next one, propellers. So you want to take those rubber bands off. You're going to want to take the rubber bands all the way off, or really make sure they're secured in there. We've seen it happen once or twice where people just set the rubber bands up under the propeller, just kind of leave it dangling. We've seen them get sucked into the motors before and cause a motor to go out. So you want to take those bands off, or just make sure they're put back somewhere good. You want the propeller blades to be out and straight. So take the propeller, straighten out the blade. You want to make a solid effort to make it pretty straight. Don't go crazy about it, but you want it to be pretty straight. The more crooked it is, when it first spins up, it's going to cause the drone to be a little shaky as they straighten out. And you want to take a look for cracks, chips, stuff like that at this time, kind of when you're straightening them out. If they're super loose, you're going to need to tighten them. They will get loose over time, those propeller, those main bolts that hold the blades on. So, every week or so you're going to want to tighten those up. But if they're super loose, like particularly flopping up and down, they're that loose, then you'll want to tighten it. Spray system next, so you want to check, make sure there's no leaks. I've filled my tank up to the volume that I want it to be filled up to. The tank cap is on there pretty good. We've had people have the tank cap just kind of set on there before, and then you lose it out in the field. That's never fun. You want to make sure you got the tips on that you want to have on. Batteries, so you got your batteries plugged in. Both batteries, if you have two of them, for example, on the 72s and the 30s, you want both of them plugged in. If you've got the 72s and 30s and you do have two batteries, between flights, so between one flight and the next, you need to make sure to fully unplug both batteries, and the drone turns all the way off between flights. If the drone does not turn all the way off between flights, some things won't work right. And you don't want to be shorting a full battery into a dead battery if you're trying to trick the drone to not have it turn off so you can be quicker on the ground. It's not good. Don't do that. And lastly, the antenna. So there's the RFD antenna, the radio kind of long ones, and then there's the GPS antenna. There's only one type of GPS that has an antenna that comes off. It's called a Hylio GPS. You want to make sure that's tight. And that RFD antenna, those can come a little bit loose over time, so you want to make sure those are tight. Otherwise, you'll be losing them in the field. So that's your drone checks. In all reality, this stuff does not take that long. The drone checks, especially, you unload, you get the thing set up. This can all happen in a matter of a couple of minutes. I mean, you're just checking things, especially if they're not broken. You're just checking. So that's step one, pretty quick. Step two, GCS. We're going to just briefly talk about this stuff because I'm not going to explain it. That's all going to be kind of left into the software video. So first thing, we're going to connect. We talked about how to do that. Next thing, we're going to go to the Areas tab, and we're going to go through this A through H here to get us out of that Areas tab. So first thing, we're going to have our boundary drawn. We're going to look at our boundary. Okay, this boundary is safe. It is clear of obstacles. I take a look out there. There's no new grain bins in the middle. I listen to my safety recommendations for how far to stay away from tree lines and stuff like that. Okay, safe boundary, that's good. Now we have our start point. So you can choose to start anywhere you want, and then the path goes out from there. Is my start point in the location where I want it to? Yes, it is. Good to go. Now we've got our settings for that path. Is that swath width, so the distance between the lines, my buffer from the outside, my angle of the lines, my offset, are all the lines on this path as I want them to be? Okay, good to go. Now I'm going to hit that play button. I'm going to create an application out of this. So my application's popped up. Okay, have I named my application what I want it to be? Selected my crop and pest and product information if I'm filling that stuff in. Okay, happy with that. Spray altitude, spray speed. Are those going to be good? We're down to F here. Spray altitude, spray speed are safe. Okay. My spray mode. Okay. Spray mode is set as I want it to be. I want to be doing 2 gallons an acre. All right. We're good to go. We're going to hit create application. So like I said before, this kind of walks you through making the mission as much as anything, and just consciously checking. For a lot of this stuff, there's no real wrong answers. I mean, there might be if you're going to fly it into something, but there's not necessarily any wrong answers. It's just making sure that you did everything, and it was conscious. If I didn't miss, I set my start point to the wrong location. Now the drone's going to some unexpected location on start. So that's Areas tab. That gets us to where we have an application ready to put onto a drone. So now we jump over to the Applications tab where we're assigning those applications to the drones. So I'm going to click on my application that I just made. There's a little play button. I hit that and assign it to a drone. And remember, I'm already connected to a drone here. That's out there. It's turned on. It's beeping at me. So I assign this thing to a drone, and now it's on a drone. We have my little path, all my spacing, everything I set. Now I can choose the start and stop point along that path. If I want it to spray the whole thing, I can. Or if I just wanted to spray the first half, okay, I'll just kind of pick the first half, set my end point halfway through. Okay, looking good, start and stop point. Now we're going to upload this application to the drone. That's in the bottom right corner next to it's going to say like drone 1. Hit that upload button. That's going to go out to the drone. Now, last thing that we want to do is we want to check that this application is on the drone. So if we jump over to the Operations tab, like we're talking about in D right here, this application should be showing up in the Operations tab. Whatever application is on the drone right now is showing up in the Operations tab. Whether you think you put it on or not, if it's not in there, then maybe there was a glitch, or maybe you just clicked the wrong button. If it's not in the Operations tab, it is not on the drone. Whatever is on the Operations tab, when you click that takeoff button, is what's on the drone, and that's where that thing is going to go. Whatever you think that you did in the Applications tab or assigned to whatever, you need to check that it shows up in the Operations tab. Operations tab is special because the rest of these tabs are, in general, you're creating things and you're sending out to the drone. Operations tab is just reading back what is on the drone right now. So it's a really good backup check for what is on there. So you're going to want to do this. This step is very important. You can tell this has caused incidents before with how much I'm harping on it. Next one, maintenance tab. So there are some advanced flight settings in the maintenance tab. You're going to want to check, make sure if you want any of those turned on, that they're turned on. Now we're going on to Operations tab settings. So this is where we're picking some of the other stuff. We generally picked our application stuff, or spray rate, stuff like that. But like we talked about earlier, there's this ferry and RTL stuff, the speeds, altitudes, all that. That's happening in this Operations tab setting. So A through F here just walks us through checking that those settings are what we want them to be. So ferry altitude and ferry speed, there's something safe. Spray altitude, that's, we're double checking that that's good. RTL altitude, RTL speed, that's going to be something safe. Again, we're going to talk a bit about this later, about how to pick these safe values. Right now, we're just talking about making sure that it is safe. Separate video later on, might be the next video even, we're going to talk about these settings and what they all are and how to pick them in particular to make sure that they're going to be safe. So D here, making sure that the RTL switches, so when and why the drone would RTL, for example, tank being empty or covering a certain acreage, spraying out a certain volume, stuff like that, losing connection with the controller, is it going to come back or not? So we want to make sure these are set. Obstacle avoidance, distance margin, and turning it off or on, is that set as you want? And then you want to save it. So at this point, we've checked our drone, we've connected to the drone, we've made a mission, we made sure it's safe, we checked all the drone settings for its various altitudes and stuff like that, making sure those are safe. Now we're going to take a quick look at the weather. So there's a little refresh weather button. If you're connected to the internet, the computer can pull weather data through GCS, so we hit that. We're going to take a last little check that our radar altimeter, the altitude, is reading something that makes sense. If it's on the ground, anything less than 3 or 4 feet is fine. It's not really meant to read inches, so it's meant for 10 feet to 100 feet. So you make sure that's reading a good reading. Make sure your batteries are full. So around 50 volts if you're 12S, around 60 if you're 14S. Reminder, 12S is for the 10, 16, and 30. 14S is for the 72. And then lastly, GPS. You're going to want to make sure that little GPS icon is in the right spot. Okay, so everything's looking good on there. We're going to take our eyes off the computer. We're going to look at our location. Okay, takeoff and landing area. There's no people near our drone. Last look at our spray area, kind of over to the field. Nothing going on out there. There's no extra grain bends or trees that I forgot to mark off. I don't see any spray planes around. Weather's going to hold out. Okay, we're good to go. Now we're going to arm the motors, and we're going to take off with the computer. Just click the arm button, click the takeoff button, and first thing we're going to check is this thing going to climb up to the ferry altitude and then start going? That's one of the first easiest checks that you can do. Okay, we're at the good altitude. If the drone climbs way past that ferry altitude, could be that you ran some tubes or something past your radar, or your radar's just broken. If it does that, press land right away and it'll come back down. Okay, drone's flying smooth and stable out to the right direction at least. Now we can kind of look back at the computer and start to monitor what's going on there. Drone sounds good, drone looks good, we're good to go. Now we're going to kind of watch it through the mission. At some point it's going to come back home to land. You're going to want to be paying attention very closely during takeoff and landing. These are two of the most dangerous times for the drone because it's nearby you, nearby other people, other equipment. So you want to monitor it as it lands. So that was our pre-flight checklist. Again, super important if you're new to follow this. You can kind of see how it walks you through, just making sure you didn't miss anything, and just double checking. There's a lot of settings in there. Double checking that all of those are going to be safe. All right, so this video maybe turned out a little longer than I was expecting. You know, moral of the story on a lot of this, calibrations, really just doing compass and flow meter, and your first flights, just take it easy. Allow yourself to have some grace through how you set yourself up, and really utilize this pre-flight checklist and make sure all the conditions are met in this first flight checklist, and you will be off to a good start. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.